For more on this, we are joined in Taipei Dr. Joanna Lei, who is a former legislator, and also in our Beijing studio, Zhonghou Tao, researcher in Taiwan Studies from Chinese Academy of Social Sciences. Welcome to the program. First question, unprecedented since 1979, cabinet member from the administration visiting Taiwan. Ms. Lei, a lot of stir created as a result of this in Taiwan.
Certainly, there were other cabinet members visiting Taiwan before, like Secretary of Transportation, EPA head, and so on and so forth. But this time, both HSS and the AIT, American Institute in Taiwan, issued press release saying that this is unprecedented. So that gives it a particular political endorsement. And also, they have issued press releases indicating its high political implications, including extending well wishes by Donald Trump and so on and so forth. And the most important part is they seem to be underscoring the contrast between quote-unquote an authoritarian system and a free and democratic system. And by touting Taiwan as the model in combating COVID-19, they're certainly sending a message and an indirect attack on the other side.
Mr. Zhong, from Beijing's perspective, how do you see this very, quote-unquote, high-profile, but rather high-choreographed visit by an administration official to Taiwan?
From Beijing's perspective, we could see that the United States is irritating or provoking the China and U.S. relationship by this kind of high-level official exchanges with Taiwan, since Taiwan is a part of China, and according to the 1979 China and U.S. joint communique, the United States could only maintain unofficial relations with Taiwan. This is really a very dangerous move, and I think it will seriously hurt or undermine the China and U.S. relationship.
Let's take the recent highly choreographed visit by a cabinet member to Taiwan into a bigger context. The latest numbers suggest in the United States, confirmed cases of COVID-19 is already reaching around 5 million. And that had been reported already, with more than 156,000 deaths, according to the WHO, as of August the 6th. Meanwhile, Taiwan's CDC reported 477 confirmed cases and 7 deaths. Those who recovered actually were 443. A huge contrast between these two places. I'm not talking about countries. I'm just talking about places in the world. The U.S., according to Dr. Fauci, who is a well-respected public health expert around the world, that is unprecedented. So, Ms. Lei, many people in Taiwan, are they calm enough to understand why this is highly choreographed visit to Taiwan by a cabinet administration official from the U.S.?
Well, certainly this is highly choreographed in your term, but also in Taiwan, a lot of people felt that it's highly welcomed. Certainly there are 3 levels of implications. The first one is you just cited, that is in terms of worldwide combat over the COVID-19 pandemic. And Taiwan has not been a part of WHO, and U.S. is pulling out of WHO. It seems that U.S. is sending a message that they will organize and orchestrate their own defense team. The second one is highly political. In the press releases I just cited, both HSS and the American Institute in Taiwan, they indicated that this is the first or highest level after the Taiwan Travel Act signed by President Trump. So it gives a practical, pragmatic delegation a very high political meaning. I think in that sense, they are trying to test the bottom line of the mainland China administration, but also it's testing the bottom line by pushing the envelope, step by step, little by little, to see where is the true bottom line or true red line by mainland China. And the third one is it's taking an unprecedented procedural approach, because all these people coming to Taiwan are not going to be quarantined. They're given something called a diplomatic bubble treatment. And I felt it's very ironic because we always talk about diplomatic immunity. And here we're really assuming that in their delegation or these delegates will have immunity or immune to the COVID-19 while they're traveling from the most infected country to Taiwan, which is quite safe at this point. So in all three levels, the medical cooperation level, political implication level, and procedural traveling level, this is really unprecedented.
How to protect anyone that are meeting with them or helping them or serving them, this is a big question.
Certainly, they will have to provide documents of a test that's within the 3 days of their travel. So there are some basic level of protection, the DNA test results they have to bring to their travel. But there will be other members. In addition to the chief delegates and the delegates, there will be supporting staff, people who support them in traveling back and forth, and they will also have very broad-based contact in Taiwan. They will give general speeches, they will visit PPE factories, and so on and so forth. So with a very high-profile, very broad-based contact, it certainly is a network which will be difficult to contact trace in the term that's most modern at this time. So I think this is a very interesting point that you're bringing. There are lots of people who welcome the U.S. visit, especially at this level, indicating a U.S. support to Taiwan. But the choice of timing and the choice of the procedure certainly will have some potential exposure to both the visitors coming to Taiwan and the local citizens in Taiwan.
So this is an interesting thing about what's going on here. Whether politically this is a boost to Taiwan or using Taiwan as a political chip for the re-election of the Trump administration. Now, Mr. Zhong, they want to take one more step, as both of you mentioned, to test the bottom line. So how smart do you think China's mainland should react to this, but at the same time alert?
I think the Chinese mainland should make a very firm but very rational response to the United States this kind of promotion. And on the one side, we should realize that Taiwan issue is the most sensitive, most important, the key issue. For example, we should lodge the solemn representation to the United States to show our standpoint, to show our bottom line and our red line. And at the same time, we should realize that the United States, just as you said, is just provoking us. It's just making us angry. We should not fall into this kind of trap. We should realize the United States' main purpose. So we should keep very rational. We should make some rational response. For example, we should continue dialogue with the United States.
Okay.
And at the same time, we should make some punishment for Taiwan authority, especially for Taiwan authority, since they are cooperating with the United States.
Having said that, though, Ms. Lei, what do you think? I mean, if you look at the history over the past few decades, let's just say from the late 90s until today, we have seen Li Tenghui, Chen Shui-bian, and Tsai Ing-wen, right? I mean, one after another, trying to push quote-unquote Taiwan independence and try to have a closer relationship with the United States. But after a while, it seems that none of them could succeed because there are much bigger interests between China and the United States than the U.S. playing the Taiwan card. So do you think now, right now, people also understand that what is going on between China and the United States could be temporary? Even for the longer term, there could be frameworks eventually drawn up in which the Taiwan issue would fall into the framework.
While previous U.S. presidents have shown support to Taiwan, there has never been a president showing such strong support as Trump has to Tsai Ing-wen. So it is understandable that the current DPP administration is under the impression that they will be firmly supported by the United States, even though maybe as a chip over their U.S.-China relationship. Having said that, it is important to know that Taiwan has issued statements saying she wished that the most recent visit, the upcoming visit, will yield some very strong partnership or regular partnership, system-to-system partnership between Taiwan and the United States in issues or matters related to public health. I think that's one point to really look into, because we have not signed formal relationship or formal contract-like, treaty-like agreement with the United States. So if that does happen, the United States is really pushing the envelope in testing what the bottom line really is from the point of view of mainland China.
This is a trap, Mr. Zhong. You just said from your perspective that U.S. set for China and using Taiwan as one of those occasions. These kinds of opportunists politics, we have seen that very frequently with the Trump administration. Transactional, particularly if you look at the timeline. Before every consultation about trade and economic ties of the two countries, we have seen there's always a series of actions taken by Washington, try to push China to a corner, so that some suggest Washington could gain more scores in the negotiation when it comes to trade and economic ties, which eventually will have a direct impact on President Trump's re-election chance. Of course, now, the topics are different. It's not about the economy anymore. It's all about the pandemic, because people are dying at this point in the U.S. So, Mr. Zhong, how, once again, do you think, at this point, can China clearly try to map out a framework between China and the U.S.? As you may know right now, the current administration in Washington, they are both incapable and unwilling to come up with a real framework between China and the United States.
China is playing a very constructive role in China and the U.S. relationship. That means although some U.S. government officials and even some senators and House those representatives are trying to endangering China and the U.S. relationship, the Chinese mainland has been working very positively for the progress of China and the U.S. relationship. So in future, the Chinese mainland could continue this kind of gesture and keep a very open-minded to build or to construct a very stable and to construct a very result-oriented and consistent China and U.S. relationship. For example, we could keep all levels of dialogue between China and U.S. high officials. At the same time, we should realize that the United States has been playing many cards, including at the first time the trade card, the technology transfer card, the South China Sea card, the Hong Kong card, but they could not realize their main purpose. So to some extent, they even has failed in this kind of areas. So that's one of the reasons why they are playing Taiwan card. So in future, I think as long as the China could build ourselves very well, I think no one could terminate or stop our rejuvenation process. And the Chinese mainland has enough confidence and capability to continue maintain a good relationship with the United States.
Ms. Lei, I'm sure there are media reports that you can have access to, helping you to understand, and many other compatriots in Taiwan, about the current and the latest China approach toward the United States, with a recent interview did by Chinese State Councilor Foreign Minister Wang Yi. He talked about categorizing issues between China and U.S. into three different groups. One is to partner with and cooperate. The other is to dialogue with the United States on. And the third is to manage the differences. These three categories. Certainly that is quite constructive, particularly if you look at over the past 4 years between China and U.S. So, Ms. Lei, obviously there are a lot of things going on, though communication is still lacking between Washington and Beijing. But once things are being realized, where do you think Taiwan will be? And do you think the people in Taiwan, intellectuals like you, already are looking at history and well thinking about this issue?
When Wang Yi issued a statement on the three categories, I thought they were very appropriate coming from a diplomatic front. However, the context, if we don't talk about other stronger words, the context between the United States and PRC have at least four major theaters. Diplomatic is one, which is always trying to appease each other. Military could be another one, which you see increasing confrontational. And the third one and fourth one are economic and financial. So from the United States point of view, they have very liquidly moved between the four theaters, launching different attacks over a PRC system. Therefore, as recently as last month, I think the Pew Research Center have documented the highest unfavorable reaction to PRC since 20 years ago. So the most highly unfavorable reaction is about 73%, and the favorable is now around 26, 25. You see a sharp difference between now and about 20 years ago that you have higher favorable ratings, favorable reactions to mainland China. I think this is all because the last 4 years, Trump administration has heightened their political contest or attack towards PRC. It is important to remain hopeful in a diplomatic front, but have to also back up the actions by strength in military and economic fronts. So the strength will have to be the base of relationship. People can only negotiate from the position of strength and not from the position of weakness.
Certainly, there are a lot of things going on. One of them that you mentioned is the danger of clash, of military confrontation, of even minor military accident, which could spiral out of control. So about that, Mr. Zhong, South China Sea, certainly an area so much related to the peace and stability across the Taiwan Strait. How about the latest situation, according to your knowledge as an expert, and how to avoid a military confrontation? Of course, that takes several to tango in a way.
Yes, the situation in South China Sea is really deteriorating for two reasons. One is the United States has been sending more warships, more airplanes to fly or to enter into South China Sea, and that is indeed intensifying the situation of South China Sea. At the same time, the United States is inviting the Japan, Australia, France, England, and some other countries to send their warships to enter into South China Sea, and that is indeed makes this situation of South China Sea more complex, more complicated than ever. So that is a really unprecedented situation. So the situation in South China Sea is indeed very dangerous. So how to deal with those situations is really a great challenge for Chinese mainland. So I think for this, the Chinese mainland should do two things. One is to keep or to maintain a dialogue with the United States, especially the military-to-military dialogue with the United States. And we should build the crisis management, this kind of mechanism to avoid the direct clash, even some accident clash. At the same time, we should keep a good relationship with those South China Sea countries, especially those ASEAN countries.
The U.S. has been trying to fight proxy wars against what it considered as the rival, whether it is the Korean War or it is the Vietnam. So you see that happening all the time. Now, none of those really benefited the countries or the regions that have been used as a card, particularly for the long-term goal. So how reasonable do you think people in Taiwan should understand that? And at the time when communication is extremely lack because of COVID-19, because of travel restrictions from all countries and regions. How can that communication be done?
In Taiwan, unfortunately, there are three forces at work at this point. One is the current administration have used the separatist movement as a way to gain political support. Second is they have already built into the textbook in the curriculum-based education that Japan is one of our heritages and have a very strong cultural identity towards Japan being built among the young people, and therefore they don't have a very strong cultural identity towards just China. And the third one is the United States national interest in using Taiwan as a very important lever in this West Pacific region. So all three different forces at work at this point unfortunately resulted in a lot of the younger Taiwanese do not feel any threats of the U.S. blatantly using Taiwan as a potential weapon or tool against mainland China. Neither do they have a very clear understanding of how destructive or totally catastrophically destructive a war can be. But in their lives, war is only a video game. They have not seen real war, real carnage, real destruction. So for the younger generation, unfortunately, it will take a very hard lesson for them to change their ideas. At this point, they really, really embrace the United States' recent show of support towards the current DPP government. So there are a lot of work to be done towards the younger generation at this point.
Absolutely. This year, 75th anniversary of Hiroshima, Nagasaki bombing.
Yeah.
And people were talking about proliferation, but that is not the only point. The only point should be to avoid war, no matter what. Whether it's a hot war, it's a cold war. Because in wars, people are just going to do all the worst things to each other that they would not imagine if there were a no war. So while some are trying to romanticize a war scenario, while some are also trying to push the brink to the edge of a war, whether hot or cold. Mr. Zhong, my final question for both of you really is short term, avoid any military confrontation.
Exactly.
But firm about territorial integrity.
Yes.
Midterm, building frameworks.
Yes.
That could eventually work for two biggest economies in the world, China and the United States, and also Taiwan being an important component of China's framework in terms of relations with all the countries, U.S. included.
Yes.
Long term, it's about how can we build a better system based on what happened after the Second World War, how the world can be run better.
Yes.
So there are three steps, very clear, but doing any of those takes enormous amount of wisdom and courage and effort. So, Mr. Zhong, if I could final words from you, tell me, as a scholar, what do you make of peace, first of all? And secondly, how people should measure what they do and what they say in order to at least ensure the short-term peace, as we mentioned?
I think peace is the most important thing for our world. We should treasure peace just like we treasure ourselves, we treasure our eyes. That is President Xi once told us in a remark last year. Another point is that we should do every effort to avoid misunderstanding, misjudgment, misperception between each other, especially between two superpowers. That means China and the United States. And only in this way could we avoid this kind of tragedy.
Tragedy. Yeah. Particularly, we do not want to make anybody make Taiwan a card, so that eventually the interest of Taiwan actually being hurt.
Yeah.
Ms. Lei, may I also pose the same question to you and invite your wisdom as an intellectual, but also as someone who knows politics inside out?
Certainly, I think peace is the status quo. Lots of people talked about maintenance of status quo. Tsai Ing-wen used it in her first campaign. But what is status quo that was left for definition? It is very, very important for people, not just across Taiwan Strait, but also worldwide, that status quo is a relative peace. It is a peaceful period that has stretched about 70 years. Now, if the United States continue to up the ante by invoking the Cold War theory and sentiment as well as real measure, then certainly we will not see the maintenance of peace. So it is important for all countries, especially major powers, military powers, economic powers, not to engage in ideological confrontation as in the Cold War, but instead going through a realistic, pragmatic approaches to build relationship and trust and faith towards each other, and not to try to intervene in each other's system or to convert each other's system. I think for that, I conclude that the U.S. language of calling regime change in different parts of the world is very dangerous.
Now, what we are seeing are people who are not having the bigger picture in mind, trying to infiltrate their own interests within a few months' time for their own political gains and for the scenario they have been painting about the world for long, did not have a chance to implement. For now, I have learned a lot from both of you, and thank you for your insights. Joanna Lei in Taipei, Zhong Hotel in Beijing. Thank you again, and may we live in peace. Thanks.